All right, welcome back, everybody, to Foul Play. That stands for Fantasy Overwatch League Play. I am your host, HeebyGB, joined as always, ever faithful, Teppo Jamma. How are you, my good friend?
I am good. It's been a week too long away from our dear podcast and our
That's true.
dear podcast listeners, but
Hmm.
I'm happy to be back, and I feel a renewed warmth towards you after a week away from your dear sultry voice.
That's true. Well, my apologies, audiophiles and fantasy lovers alike. I am sorry that we were not able to give you what you desire. That is all on me and my new crazy work schedule. Still trying to get a handle on that. Once we get a more lockdown schedule for this show, we'll be doing two things. One, telling you on all the social media, so make sure you follow High Noon Podcast Foul Play on Twitter. Get us in the Discord. Find us wherever you can. But two, we're once that happens, we will be streaming this show live. I know that's kind of the way it used to be, so I know that is a very exciting prospect for a lot of you. We'll be able to answer and field questions live in chat. It's something we're just like really excited to do because I mean we love just talking about fantasy, so we know there must be at least there are dozens of there are singles of you out there that like doing it the same. So if you can talk back to us in chat, we would absolutely love that. Sorry that again is on me. We will get that figured out very soon, and then we'll start streaming this thing live. I will be talking about it. So, but yeah,
I was very ready to blame Overwatch League for giving us stats late for the episode, but all right,
no, no,
you
no, no,
take that
no.
upon you.
I have to.
A
This,
proper Catholic boy, just
yeah.
giving himself the lashings.
Mhm. It is my cross to bear, and I shall
Yeah.
bear it. Uh, so sorry, listeners, but we're back, and so are your Week One matchup scores. If you're playing on Draft Buff and High Noon, both of those services have decided as a default to move to the 2 weeks matchup structure in terms of fantasy games. I personally think it was a good idea. I did fight against it originally. I really liked the 1 week things, but with this schedule, I mean, what are you gonna do? Your hands are tied. Virus came and like cut a bunch of these homestands in half in terms of games. So just a lot of stuff came in. Really fought against the fantasy wave, which what are you gonna do? It's Overwatch League Fantasy. If you're not used to this kind of stuff now, well, buckle in. It's always been here and it probably always will be. But that is something I don't even think we've been able to talk about since we didn't do an episode last week. Is we have the Stats Lab out, officially made by Overwatch League. Stats Lab is probably the most in-depth stats we could have ever asked for and more. They give you everything from meters of payload pushed by single players to like efficiency of your accuracy, all this kind of stuff, everything you would want, including the damage and elimination stats that we use for fantasy. Just the one caveat is that it's released on Tuesdays, meaning that we do not have live scoring for our fantasy platforms, which is really, really sucky. I mean, in terms of a viewer standpoint, I very much feel for our developer friends who have to probably answer 12 questions a day on the low end of where are my stats, why aren't they showing up. But if you're listening to this and you are worried your stats aren't showing up right away, don't worry, your thing's not bugged. Overwatch League just decided to not give us the stats until Tuesday, which again, I'm being a little bitter about something that is honestly really amazing. We have like a giant comprehensive stats library to play around with now. I think this is going to improve fantasy a lot in terms of depth going forward in the future of the game. My little soapbox, I think a couple of stats could be added to fantasy. One I've been pushing for a lot lately is damage amplified. I think that would be an awesome stat to include. I think it buffs Orisa and Mercy and potentially Baptiste, which would up your main tanks and main support stats, which are both roles that I think need the boost. So that's my opinion. Any thoughts on Stats Lab and every headache and blessing that comes with it, Teppo?
I'm happy to have it, and I wish it was better.
Uh
So
huh.
I am
Yeah.
grateful, but I am still a capitalist looking for, you
Yes.
know, progress.
No, I know it's funny because I mean I usually am the grand optimist when it comes to these kind of things. Like I will admit I love the stats stuff. Like I think it's so fun to play around with. I think we can pull out some just crazy whack statistics that don't mean anything in terms of like how a team's actually performing in game, but could mean everything to your fantasy games, which is exactly what this show profits from. In all honesty, so that but yeah, that's Foul Play's stance on Stats Lab, if you were wondering. So don't worry, we got the information that you have been craving for those 2 weeks. Second point of discussion I want to talk about is the makeup games for the Chinese homestands have been announced. They're gonna be played out in weeks 6 and 7 during the weekdays as opposed to the weekends when these other games are, and potentially having a couple of games stacked onto the week 5 Seoul Dynasty homestand. All the games will be played in Korea, and I believe they did confirm that they will all be streamed. So if you're like, thank goodness. I think there was like a slight fear that they wouldn't, but I mean, that would be horrible. So I'm glad they actually did. The question is, Teppo, what are we gonna do with these with fantasy? Do you think these games should be included in scoring?
Yes.
Okay, cool. That's my thought too. I mean, the concern is that like since they've moved and now your weeks are really backloaded, I think just your team would play more often in a week or less often would give you like a really big advantage in that matchup for that 2 week span. However, I mean, the other option is not including those games, and that means if you drafted that player, you're getting like insane percent decrease of value out of that player if all of a sudden you've lost 4 games from them out of the season that they're not scoring for you on your team. So my opinion is absolutely we have to use them in the matchups. I think it's kind of unfortunate that I'll maybe throw that matchup a little bit of a loop, but I think that they are necessary.
Yeah, the way I see it, fantasy this season is a mess. The schedule is a mess. The meta is confusing. Coronavirus sucks. I think it will continue to be a mess, and we have to just embrace it. And I'm not gonna limit us when we're already so limited. So I want to count everything, and hopefully in a few years' time, we'll look back on this season as a beautiful, painful year for us all to have shared in together. And we'll have real-time scores updating during the Overwatch League broadcast and everything to look forward to while we cower below the cupboard as our Project A overlords chill in the mainstream.
As Riot becomes what is the Parks and Rec, the Verizon Chexicon, when Verizon, Chipotle, and Exxon Oil all become one of the 7 companies. One of the 7 companies. Riot owns all video games and all esports. Ugh, esports monopoly. Bernie Sanders would not stand for it. Also, go to berniesanders.com to donate directly. Make sure your funds are going towards the future of our country. Your country, not mine. Anyways, the last point before we
international interference.
I was a plant the whole time. All right. But I can't vote, so it doesn't matter. Anyways, we have to talk about the meta a little bit because this definitely pertains to fantasy. We're gonna more dive towards that discussion point. The meta is a little bit different than we anticipated it in a couple episodes ago, and we tried to give you a bit of a primer. I wouldn't say it's too different. I think we got most things right. The supports changed up a little bit. Before we get it, because Tempo's done a lot of good work and like going more in detail of each role and what's scoring and what's doing really well. I think,
yeah, brother.
Yes. Oh man, we are the biggest nerds and we do it well. No, but an important note is that I think this season somehow even more than previous seasons, this is a season of like game 5s matter more than ever. We're seeing main supports like score really well. Maybe not outscoring the top flex support players, but if they're hitting those game 5s, they probably will be. So I think this is going to be game 5 season more than ever. And I think that's only going to increase with hero pools. I think the parity is just going to level up there too. And so you are just going to be digging for those long competitive matches that give you whole extra maps worth of points. So be on the lookout for that. But Tebo, why don't you talk to me a little bit about your meta survey that you've taken over the last 2 weeks?
Yeah, I will. I will get into it. First off, I will be upset with you because you talked about the meta, and in the same sentence you said dive into, and you can't use meta and dive in the same
Oh
sentence
no!
because I get half to approximately 80% chub, and I just can't recover from there. All right. So
Oh
now that I
gosh.
am recovered, now that I've drank my water and refocused,
No, I'll run my
so
laps after, Coach. Don't worry.
yeah,
Yeah.
let's get those suicides in.
Oh god.
Um,
Trauma.
but yeah, as it stands right now, so we kind of have a meta set up for the first 5 weeks, and then hero bans come in at the fifth week, I believe.
Yeah.
And so what we're seeing right now is hit scan outscores projectile DPS by a lot because your hit scan is playing McCree and Widowmaker.
Hmm.
May
As
is
opposed to May.
useless for yeah, May is useless for fantasy, but those players might be valuable weeks 5 and onwards. We'll have to see. Um, that also kind of follows what we've seen in seasons past, where generally hit scan was the more valued role in fantasy, but
Ish,
there was
yeah.
definitely more parity, and I think we'll see a lot more parity as the season goes on.
I think in season
Um,
2 that was the way, just because Zarya scored the most points in
yeah,
goats. But like as soon as Hanzo came in, it was like whoever was playing your
yeah,
Hanzo
that
was the
that
big
Hanzo
scoring.
Farah, like
Yeah.
that crazy flex.
Well, because Hanzo could be played by your hit scan or your projectile. Like it really just depends on the
Yeah,
team. So that was
yeah,
where it was
hundred
iffy.
percent.
All right, talk
And
to me
then
about
I think
support.
the support one is the most confusing for this
Yes.
season because Ana definitely hurts their point output,
Hmm.
but support flex supports they still reign supreme. They still were the highest scorers in the past couple weeks,
Yeah.
but the gulf was a lot more narrow than it has been in
Yes.
seasons past, where main supports, especially the more aggressive Lucio players like FD God,
FT God.
um, he's just like the perfect example.
Yeah.
Like
I'd say
they
Astro
were a
too.
lot tighter. Yeah, Funny Astro
Yeah.
was up there too.
Uh-huh.
But still, we saw that Ana is getting a ton of value,
Yeah.
and just like go into it a little bit so that nobody's freaking out about that flex support role taking a dip. Like they're playing Ana mostly, and they still were at the top of the leaderboards generally.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and just looking at, I had two examples that I think are really good. So, um, one is like just Jonak, looking at him from last season when he was playing Zen, just looking at a limb's damage and healing output per 10 minutes
Mm-hmm.
compared to his Ana this season. He was he had 138.2% less production this season than he did last season in those
Hmm.
categories.
Interesting.
So, and when I wanted to compare the Shocks flex support, so I compared Architect, who this season, just had a dominant honor performance,
Yeah.
to Violet Zen performance last season, which was absolutely nutty,
Right.
and that was an 175.1% drop off. So literally the best on the first couple weekends scored 175.1% less on average than a Zenyatta would have on that same team last season.
Mm.
So flex supports are still super valuable, even though main supports for these first 5 weeks are much closer to that peak.
Yeah.
But once Zen is back meta, everything changes, and it's flex support on top once again.
Everything changed when the Zen attack.
Yeah.
That's true. I agree. I think a couple other flex supports got hit even harder when the brig was actually like placed on
So
them.
stupid.
Yes, I agree,
I
but it is a viable strategy. I mean, like, I would say it's a viable strategy only when McCree is meta, because it's like a nice little pocket shield that I think actually worked in a few situations. I don't think Houston was the right situation,
no.
but I do think other teams, like for example, when Florida was operating with it a little bit, when they were doing Brig Ana, that was an interesting comp, but Brig will not score you good fantasy points either. Armor
No.
provided is not healing. So
Which also should be changed. Like shields and armor provided should probably count towards your heals.
do you think,
Because it's
but
a
like
little
Brig,
unfair for Lucio that he doesn't get. I guess, yeah, his ult, maybe it would inflate his stats too much, but it's a
it
little
would go
weird. Like
so
you don't
high.
get value out of that ult.
You would have to, the stat would have to be much lower than it is for like healing. It would
Yeah.
if you're doing shields provided, or because a Brig is the weird one because she overheals. like with her
Yeah.
armor pack, which is like, I mean, are you really getting value out of that every time? Like,
Yeah.
because also maybe this is a discussion point that we should get into, is the discussion of should fantasy points reflect actual value in game. Now, I've seen this discussion, like, especially on the Draft Buff Discord, so shout out to that Discord for being very, very vocal about anything that they see inside this game. They do a good job of it. I think the Draft Buff is just like trying to listen to everybody and take intake. So Godspeed to them. But there's a lot of
Mr.
different
Buff
opinions.
himself.
Mister
Mi-
Buff Banana himself.
yeah.
Um, it is strange, but like for example, initially when Draft Buff released their first wave of scoring, they included all damage. So they included damage done to barriers. They
Mhm.
got a crap ton of pushback on that, and they reverted it. So now just damage, it's just hero damage done,
Yeah.
which is like questionable. So okay, I don't want to get too much into this because we have a lot to cover in our normal segments of the show. But
Yeah.
I'm honestly, I'm so curious what you think because I've been kind of living in my. I didn't have this episode last week. All right, I've been living in my fantasy vacuum. So talk to me, Teppo. What do you think? Should fantasy points reflect actual value attained in game? Because I think Brig Overheal is a really good example of that. Because it's sometimes really valuable, sometimes doesn't get you any value because it does decay. So what do you think?
Yeah, I think ideally it would mimic what happens in the real game,
The
but
actual value
it's
achieved.
just
Okay.
yeah, the act, but it's almost impossible for it to.
Mm-hmm.
Like, in an ideal world where we had all of the numbers right and we could access all of the stats,
Mm-hmm.
it would be great to just, you know, uh, a Maywall blocking an ultimate, like
Yes.
that's real value that it's very hard to replicate in fantasy. So for right now, I'm just focused on us at least getting the normal fantasy stuff down.
Yes.
Like
Oh, of
if we
course.
could just get damage, healing, and a limbs for
Mm-hmm.
every map, like
Yes.
on a consistent basis, I would be thrilled. And then
Right.
like
Well,
when it
and
comes
yes,
to
I
like
do
those
think the
niftier
stats.
things, we'll have to see.
Yeah, and I do think the sets that we have currently do reflect actual value in game. I think I don't know. It's a hard push to say they don't. I mean,
Yeah.
they're just like this is what you need to do to win. So I think go and do it. But I will say I don't know. I it's hard because yes, like I don't think we can capture every point of value in a game. Like yes, Ryan. I remember there was a Surefour made a tweet in the season 2 stage 1 asking Captain Planet if any of his Reinhardt blocks from his personal Zarya bubbles were like counted because like he negated like I think 3 Rhine ults in a game by just bubbling right in front of the
That's
Rhine
jokes.
and blocking it and I think one of them was caught on stream, but like he was like asking like, are those things counted? And Captain Planet was like, no, we have no way to count that. So I think alt efficiency would be a cool stat. I personally, I think we could get a little fun with it. I would love to see like Anna sleep darts be worth like 2
Yeah,
points or
it'd be
something,
huge.
like, and I understand that a lot of them aren't even value. They're just like they make the team have to sit there for 2 extra seconds while they wait for the guy to wake up, right? Like some of them don't even matter, but I think it would be very fun. Um, but anyway, that's my piece. You have one more role to talk about on the meta. So why don't you talk to me about the tanks and what they're looking like in this landscape?
Yeah, so I'll say that it's actually kind of similar to the support situation
Mm-hmm. It is.
where we're kind of affected by the carryover from the preseason, where I think tanks right now are impacted by what was the meta before the Overwatch League's
Mm-hmm.
current season started, which, teams have mentioned that they were running a lot of double main tank, and that obviously is going to negatively impact your flex tank because they're stuck on a they're either stuck on the bench or stuck on a character that gets less value,
Right. Best case scenario,
So
they're playing Reinhardt for you. So
yeah,
yeah.
which is not ideal.
No.
So I think we saw flex tank score less
Mm-hmm.
over these past couple weekends than we expected, and because of that, it seemed like main tanks are a little better than uh, what we could have thought. But I think the best scoring tanks were just the ones who play Diva nonstop,
Mm-hmm.
and that's going to be continue to be the case moving forward. And I think we're going to trend towards more Diva being played rather than less over these next few weeks until
Right.
hero bans come in. So you stay true to your flex tanks and like you try to pick up the ones that are being slept on right now.
Yep, for sure. And if I'm guessing what tank's getting banned first, I'm guessing it's Reinhardt. So I mean that usually means your main tank's gonna be stuck on either Ball or Orisa, which I don't think either score super well. So that, or maybe Monkey, which does score pretty well. But
Yeah, Monkey's
then you're
legend.
the elimination god, Wukong. Anyway, all of that non-numbers talk out of the way, now we get into our nitty-gritty depth of the show with our first segment. That's right, segments are back in a major way. They're going to look very similar to what you heard from us last year, but a little bit tweaked, a little bit fine-tuned. We took a lot of your feedback over the offseason, and we tried to adapt it to this show. That being said, we are still very open to feedback, so make sure you let us know if you think anything would be cool on the show, you think anything needs changing. We are very receptive to that, so let us know. But anyway, that being said, we're talking leaders and feeders. We're going to talk about one in each of the roles of DPS, support, and tank. So Teppo, why don't you take your choice of leader for this week?
I will give you your boy, so I
Okay.
will do support instead. So for leaders and feeders, we're doing like people not necessarily who were the highest scoring or lowest scoring on a week, because that's not super interesting, but
Yeah.
people who overperformed or underperformed.
Yes.
So my
Which is kind of
support,
what we did
or
before, but like not really. So
yeah, we generally, we played it. It was a little less I don't know, it was a little less clear.
yeah, it's in
But
stone now. It's in the tablet
yeah, it's
over
in
there.
stone.
Yeah.
All right. So for support, I'm going with a guy who I think he was like the third highest scorer for High Noon's best match, and that's Aim God. Like he was a great leader for us this week because one, a lot of people didn't have super high expectations from him or the Justice this past season, and that's not necessarily nullified by them having had a pretty decent weekend. But Aim God in particular looked really good, and a lot of people were probably concerned because he split so much time with Persia last season. But it turns out Boston is just annoying, and Aim God is actually elite. And so he scored 139.84 in High Noon Best Match, and he averaged 126.8 on Draft Buff, which are both really strong marks,
Yes.
which outscored our DPS and tank leaders. So I think we just saw a really great week from Aim God, and it gives a lot of confidence for him this season.
Yeah. It's gonna be awesome. Thank you for giving me my boy. It is Bird Redeemed. I mean Bird Ring. um, Playing for, of course, my team, the LA Gladiators. I have not been shy about loving the royal purple. I'm very excited about Bird Ring. I was not previous to the season, but I was convinced by some DPay interviews as well as seeing his play in week 1. I think that he is playing well with this team. I think he's definitely popping off. I hope that this high carries throughout the whole season, but in terms of stats, he got 137.22 in High Noon's best game. That's good for 5th overall all scorers and number 1 DPS, by the way. And he was in front of a bunch of other flex supports, which was super nice. And then in the draft buff average score, he got 123.35. Definitely took some hits from some deaths in that game. I think because draft buff does account for those. I think that Gladiators lost, and so anytime you're going to be in a losing game, those deaths are going to hit you a little bit hard, but still really impressive to be hitting such a high score. I'm really excited about Birding's potential. I think he also netted a lot of these points because he flexed to the Reaper a little bit, which I do think will net you a good amount. So why don't you talk to me about the last leader?
Yeah, so the last leader isn't necessarily an overperformer because tanks all generally underperform these past 2 weekends. So it's Space, who was the number 1 scoring tank. We could have tried to find an overperformer, but that would have taken a lot of scrolling down because the tanks scored really badly this whole session. So Space, it's nice to see he's actually getting you that value from when you drafted him. He scored 117.72 in best match and 119.8 in draft buff. And yeah, there's just not much to be said. He played pretty well, and Diva is king.
It's cool to I don't know. It's interesting to me that Shaz scored higher than Twilight. Well, I guess Twilight split maps with Ryu Jae-hong, so that's maybe not so interesting. But I mean, Shaz scored higher. Space scored higher than Janu, just above, like right above him. And Birdring scored higher than Haxall and then I guess Yamansu and Stitch switch maps as well. So, okay, maybe this isn't as interesting as a point, but I'm just saying we may have lost the game, but we didn't lose the fantasy points.
Yeah,
Hey,
we
hey,
got the numbers.
hey! Let's go, gladiators. Gladiators. All
Oh
right.
my god.
Well, speaking of absolute opposites, we're talking about feeders because my gladiators are none. So I'll talk about the first feeder here. That is the DPS Saya player. Yes, he barely played, and that what's put him on this list primarily, as well as his points. In High Noon Best Match, got 15.52. In Draft Buff Average Score, he got 12.9. Saya player definitely fed. Maybe not in server, but in terms of fantasy points, that is what happened. Lost a lot of his playing time to BQB, who admittedly looked very impressive and is most likely on your waiver wires. So keep a lookout there. But I think a Saya player not seeing much playtime in a very hit scan dominant meta is very concerning to Saya player owners. And we're gonna talk more about him in a later segment. So I'll save any more discussion on him for now. But Tepa, take a feeder.
I'd just say on Saya player, like it's less of a testament to him being a feeder as it is to BQB being a leader, so it's unfortunate for fantasy, but Saya player lost a lot of time to a guy who got a lot better this past offseason. So
I don't know, man. Stats say Saya player's bad. I think Saya player's bad.
Nah,
I don't know.
Saya's elite. Saya clicks head. We're a click head stats. But yeah, so for my feeder, I'll take it's a very similar situation. It's Repel for the Outlaws. Outlaws looked garbage tier. They said they were really Flames said they were confident coming into this weekend, then they got thrashed. So they look like they're living in some sort of bizarro world, and they're a little delirious.
Scrimbuck had him pretty high too. Like I don't know. This is whack.
Repel lost time to Raucous, which I could have predicted since I had Repel ranked pretty low preseason, but I could not have predicted him in the Outlaws looking this bad. I think moving forward, Repel will get it back, but he scored 44.72 in best match, 36.2 in draft buff. Like this dude was he was struggling just as his team were, which leads us to the next.
That's Mech Zero. Mech Zero is an off tank for the Houston Zero Ulas. I don't know. I can't. This is bad.
That's a good one. That was very Swedish.
Thank you.
Liked it. Ula.
Ulas. Yes. Yeah. Well, Meko did not perform. He also did not lose maps to anyone else, so his low stat line is a little less forgivable than Repel is. Meko got 37.13 in best match. This is an abysmal score when you account for the top end being space at 117.
Yep.
That is horrendous. Like I don't care how bad you lose. Like that is such a bad stat line. Draft buff gave him 37.1. So yikes. Man, I don't know. There's not too much to say. Like Houston just did bad, and that results in fantasy bad. Like there's not much more, especially when they don't even make it competitive. Like there's times where you can lose and score well. Gladiators are a case in point. There's times where you lose and you score nothing, and Houston is that case in point. And so you're going to be seeing a lot of this. I think we're going to be seeing some like just teams that you just don't want to own any of their players. And right now, I'm not sure there's an Outlaws player I'm comfortable playing. Meko scores terribly, and Raucous and Repel are splitting time. Like the two high scoring roles are like iffy, and who knows who plays their DPS. However, that being said, I think there is a chance for Meko to turn this around with only Spree behind him. Like I think he would be a consistent like player. So maybe when they're playing some weaker teams and stuff. So I'm going to say don't completely drop Meko. But anyway,
this weekend is a true test because they're in the garbage bowl and they play the Uprising. So if Meko can't put up more than like 40 points, it's time to just cut loose.
Yes, please. Okay, that is our shout. We want the Boston Houston game to be called the Garbage Bowl. That would be an incredible. Just like we have the Orange Bowl when Shock and Philly play each other, but not really anymore since Shock changed their stupid colors. Anyway.
Yeah, now just the Halloween Bowl.
The Spook Bowl.
Yeah, all right. Spook Bowl.
Spook Bowl. Okay. We gotta quit.
Candy Bowl. All right, let's move on.
It's a boo. Anyway. Our next segment of the week is the daily featured game. So daily is another way you can play fantasy other than High Noon or Draft Buff. If you go over to fantasyowl.com, you can play daily contests. It's a lot of fun, and we have a featured contest every Saturday, which is the FOWL Play 50. Now, we only allow 50 entrants, so you got to get your team in there fast. It's a very competitive, very
super quick. Yeah, super game.
Super quick. Yeah, they go up fast, especially because I don't know if I've figured out how to limit to only one team per entry. So, they go quick. But as we promise, we have to talk about the winning team of the FOWL Play 50 every week. We're going to discuss it. So we're not quite sure where. Well, yeah, we'll discuss it every week. But anyway, this week was kind of weird because we had two. But we wanted to talk about the winning team member, and it's a name that, I don't know, I've never heard of this guy before. Have you heard of him? His name is...
I've heard only bad things.
Yeah. A. Smith. A. Smith won the daily fantasy contest. So congratulations to you, A. Smith. If you're out there, reach out to us on Discord. We'd love to hear from you. But we're going to be discussing your team, today. So I'll just run by what he picked and their prices, and then we can talk about kind of just the general team and analysis. So for his DPS, he had Decay and Surefour, both worth 18 cost. And important note, we do have the multiplier of one player on there. Yeah, for a real game changer. Exactly. And A. Smith chose to have Decay as his double scorer, who netted him a crap ton of points, which is a really, really good choice. He had Twilight and Gray on his supports, which were 18 and 14 in terms of cost. And he had McGravy and Nevix on for 14 and 17. McGravy was an absolute steal for the amount of value that he got. That is crazy. So well done. So big scoring. I'm going to talk about McGravy. It was the number 1 tank overall in that daily fantasy game. It was the 10th most expensive tank. So just what a steal. McGravy got 191.42 points in that day. Yeah, dude friggin' racked it up with those diva bombs. It was like a 6K in one play. Like, that is a lot of damage. That's a lot of damage. Anyway.
Yeah, no, it really worked out for him this week. Like, he bought high on a bunch of guys who performed well. You know, Decay was the 4th most expensive, and then he ended up being the number 2 DPS for scoring. Nevix was the 3rd most expensive tank. He ended up being the number 4 tank overall. And then, yeah, just McGravy seal for him.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it was a big play. I think Nevix, it was also a solid points getter. But yeah, I think the real thing is he had no one that scored bad. Like, he picked everyone that was playing, which was really good. I mean, Gray did split maps with Hip, or did Gray not split maps on that day?
No, I think he did.
He split one.
I'm pretty sure
he
did. So I think he
lucked
lucked out despite that.
Yeah. I think Gray's still scoring 140 is like a great point score. I mean, I guess Twilight also split maps. So like 2 very good players. Yeah, I don't know. He did well. Great job. So yeah, A. Smith, if you're out there, we'd love to hear from you. If you want to guest on the podcast, you're welcome anytime.
We just have to screen you first. Once we get through the rigorous screening process.
Oh, yeah, there's an audition. You got to write a sketch too. Anyway, so that is our daily contest. Don't forget to enter into our FOWL Play 50, as well as we have an unlimited league on highnoon.gg if you want to enter in every week. I so far have perfect attendance. I still haven't forgotten to enter my team.
Let's go.
And I'm like around middle of the pack. Maybe that'd be a fun segment, Tippo. We can talk about where we are on the unlimited ranks every week, which admittedly is not great for me.
Just yet.
I mean, come on, play Fury. Anyway, so like we were saying earlier in the show, map 5s are going to be huge for fantasy this year. Absolutely phenomenal, like they always have been. Playtime above all else is honestly the subtitle of the show at this point. So we're going to go into our next segment, that is Money Matchups. That's my new character. I think it's the Monopoly guy.
Ka-ching.
Yeah,
I like it. Yeah, I was trying to figure out I need the cash register sound. I can't.
Yeah, we needed a good cash register sound. Okay, cool. Also, it's a hard and fast rule that on FOWL Play that we don't have actual audio drops. It's just Teppo making mouth sounds.
Yeah.
Which is good. Anyway, money matchups are potential 5 maps for this weekend. I currently have Paris versus Washington listed. And wait, isn't New York Philly this weekend too? Am I going
Yes.
crazy? Is that this weekend?
No.
That should definitely be on our list.
That should be the top of our list.
That should be the one match that we're talking about. Okay, so those two are coming up in week 3. I think these are like massive maps. I mean New York Philly is like the biggest placement game I think we've had so far this season. Like, okay, where are these teams? Like, yeah, it's gonna be great. Like, is New York really as far ahead as we think they are? Is Philly surpassing them in like the big 3 this year? What's gonna happen? Can the super team defeat the old man guard plus who are you? I don't know. So that's going to be a sweet game. I think Paris-Washington is also going to be just competitive. I mean, Paris got the upgrade of Hanbin, and Washington looked good. I mean, I think Philly played a little bit bad versus them, but okay, I mean, if you make mistakes, that could be due to you having to overextend to defeat Washington. I don't know. I'm more optimistic on Washington than I know some analysts out there are, but maybe we'll see. I think it's a potential for a map 5, though. I don't think this is a blowout either direction. Which is what you want to be avoiding in terms of fantasy points. So I think that this is a solid map or a solid game to choose players from. So,
agreed.
Yeah, that's my thought. Any more thought on those two?
They match up well.
Yeah, as in a money sort of way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Much like money matches up well.
Yes. I love matching up my money with more money. We originally had talked about doing the week 4 money matchups as well, because when you set your roster, you're setting it for 2 weeks in a row. Which I think we could talk a little bit about. I don't know. Maybe we'll skip it. We'll talk about week 4 next week. Let's do that.
Yeah, let's do that.
Yeah, let's do that. I think it is just a good point of advice to be looking ahead to the second week of your matchup. Maybe see if there's a couple of really good players on any of those teams that are sitting on your waiver wire. Might be worth swapping in early and grabbing a player just to bench them. Because of dynamic scoring on Draft Buff, I know you can swap players out that haven't netted any points yet. Think it might be a decent option. Just looking ahead at week 4. So that's my piece of advice. Now,
great piece of it.
Thank you. Now, oh wow, your mic is sort of death. Anyway, we're gonna jump to our next segment of the show, which is our sleepers, our sleepy players. Okay, you gotta stop touching your mic or something. It is like. All right, I'm gonna keep going. I'm gonna mute you for a sec. Anyway, okay, so for sleepers, just so you're all aware, we have kind of hardened our format a little bit this year. We last year was kind of up in the air and what like players we could choose and what we can't. So just so you're all aware, sleepers are basically they're going to apply to all fantasy games, but the rules that we have of who we can choose as sleepers and not are all focused on run daily. So basically, we made the hard and fast rule that our sleepers have to be worth 13 points or lower on the cost for them to count, and these are the ones that we think you could pick up to fill out your fantasy team on your daily games, or maybe are worth looking at in terms of the overall league. So. I will say mine first. My DPS sleeper I have this week is Finland's gift to esports. That's Linkser, only costing you 10 points, probably due to him not playing at all last week, which some of you may say is a crackpot theory. But I have him here as my sleeper just because I think Houston maybe got a bit of a wake-up call. I'm really hoping that Linkser not playing was not a coaching choice. I know he said he wasn't sick. I'm not really buying it. I hope they finally believe, like, okay, maybe we do need a Widow in case a player like Saya player comes and just steps on our throat. So hopefully they wise up, and maybe Linkser doesn't see play all the time, but I think he at least sees play in a couple maps, which in fantasy, on terms of daily, can get you a decent amount of value. Don't make him your double point scorer or anything, but he's my sleeper for DPS. Teppo, who's your DPS sleeper?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. We're good to go.
Let's go. Beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
My computer keeps turning on iTunes and playing Kanye's album, and it's insane. I don't understand what's going on. Speaking of not understanding what's going on, my DPS sleeper is the one, the only, he who deserves all of our energy, and that is Jerry.
That is
Okay.
Jerry. Also,
Now,
update on our bet. I am clearly in the lead.
yes,
Logix
you
has
are.
points. Jerry has none.
Jerry
Whoop
has
whoop.
0 right now. And listen, Jerry is a double-edged sword. One edge, 0 points. The other edge, more points than Color Hex. Jerry is the best hits, or I don't even remember who it was. Maybe Munchkin was playing Hitscan. I don't remember anymore. Whoever it was bad. I only remember Color Hex playing Hanzo for a little bit.
You just saw
But
no Jerry and you just saw
yeah,
red. There
just
was no,
just
there's no
flashing
life in your
across the screen,
eyes.
just
Yeah.
pure anger.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Listen, Mineral said Jerry could play sooner rather than later. He could definitely see the stage soon. They know how good he is.
All right.
I think if he
Maybe they don't
plays,
know
he
as
can be
well as
great.
you do, but
Oh,
they
I
do
know
know.
well. Yeah, they are aware.
Okay,
Not
good to
fully
hear.
aware, but yeah,
All right.
very double-edged sword,
Yep.
sharp edges.
Well, I think both of our DPS sleepers are both an equal amount of risk. Why they're both only worth 10 points, to be fair.
Yep.
Neither of them have played in the league yet for this season, so I think that counts. Interestingly enough, are also playing each other, so we'll see who
Perfect.
wins there. Okay, for support sleepers, I have a Houston Outlaw here. I have Raucus. He's only costing 13. I think that Repel Raucus splitting time is interesting to say the least, but I don't know. There's a part of me that thinks you're putting the Outlaws in front of a home crowd. I think if Houston didn't play last week, I'd be like, Raucus plays. Like, please the fans, throw out a player that they know and are excited to see. But now, I don't know. Maybe Houston's just excited for a win. So, I don't know. We'll see. But I think Raucus only costing 13 is a decent team filler and will at least get you some points. So, yeah, that's where he lands for me.
Yeah. My support sleeper is somebody who's also splitting time right now as a flex support, but he is on a better team
Mm.
and he is playing better than Raucus. So that is Hip from the Paris Eternal or Hype. I'm not sure which one it is. I think it's Hip.
Oh, it's got
I
to be
don't know
hip.
anymore. But it's definitely Hip, whatever it is.
Hip to be
But
square.
it's pretty trendy. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, Hip, he's playing Washington. He only costs 13. And I think, him and Gray are going to split time again, probably. But he's been playing really well in the maps he's been on.
Yep. Yeah, no, I think the dude's a great player. Honestly, would have picked him as my sleeper if you hadn't before. I did. So let's talk about tanks. Oh, by the way, those were both worth 13 points on the daily fantasy cost board.
Yep.
I don't know.
Yep.
All right, tank sleepers. I have honestly met somehow probably a riskier pick than Linkser. I have Ben Best of the Paris Eternal, who will be playing Washington this upcoming week. He is worth 13 points. Scored extremely well for a main tank last week. He got 117 in daily fantasy on his Saturday performance. I think scored more on his Sunday performance. Anyway, for a main tank, that's quite good. I think he did well. However, Paris Eternal is unlocking Hanbin this week. He is eligible to play. I mean, if I was the Eternal coaches, I wouldn't be playing Ben Best, but who knows? Maybe he gets some points. I don't know. It was hard to pick a tank. Go ahead, Teppo.
Yeah, for me, I took Brucein, who's
Mhm.
playing the Outlaws, and he got no playtime last week. It's him and Muffin. It
Uh-huh.
is supposed to be for him either. They're the two flex tank options for the Uprising. The Uprising pretty candidly said they want to start running a diva instead of that horrid double main tank
Oh, because they put
that they
Axiom
were
Fusions,
stuck on.
right?
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly. So I think Brucein is pretty obviously the better of those two diva players.
Mm,
So I think he actually is like a huge sleeper for this week
yeah,
because if he's
honestly.
getting permanent diva play
Over a
against
bad
the
team like Houston,
Outlaws,
yeah,
yeah,
this could be
like
huge.
I'm really excited for that one.
Oh,
And I would just say like overall looking at daily this week, the sleepers are pretty tough to come by. I really
yeah.
like Brucein, but the rest of them, like this is where you want to kind of get top tier and mid tier players. So I'm very comfortable going for like like FD God or one of those main supports like Funny Astro and FD God both cost 14, which is
Okay.
just above our cutoff. But
Right.
like
The honorable
using
mentions.
somebody like that to let yourself have some higher profile players is definitely worthwhile this week.
Yes, that's true. Yeah, I think it's a good point. Also, small note, I think Diva players somehow are even going to score better due to the buffs to her booster cooldown. Like, I just think
Yeah,
divas are going to survive more. Like,
yeah,
you might
Diva's
be
gonna be
able to like
nasty
dodge
this
out of a
year.
death out of a team fight. So like you honestly could score more points that way on Draft Buff
Yep.
or Fantasy Owl because those are the two that account for deaths. So interesting tidbit with Heebie-Jeebie. Anyway, we are on to our kind of our last segment of the week. So we are going to be calling this segment Game of the Week, and I'm going to be coming up with a different game every single week for us to play on the show. This is going to be a blast. It's a real game-o-matic situation. This game I have affectionately titled Drop 'em, Shop 'em, or Lock 'em. This is for players that you have on your bench or on your roster that I think you should A, drop to the waiver wire, B, shop them, send out some trade offers, or C, lock them. And we basically threw up some players that are kind of in positional battles right now and what we think you should do with them. So, Teppo, I want to talk to two players, Crimzo and Unko. Do you drop them, shop them, or lock them for either of these players? What do you think?
Crimzo, shop.
Okay.
Unco, cop.
Cop, it's lock.
But if you don't have him, you could try to buy him.
Okay. Cop him. Okay. Drop
I
him, shop
changed-
him,
I
lock him, or
changed-
cop him. All right. Fair enough.
But no, because you can't lock Unco into your lineup just yet because we have to wait until he's healthy. But I do think as the season goes on, Unco will be healthy and he's a better player than Crimzo, so he'll take that spot.
But if you
If
have
can sell
Unco, you're
Crimzo, I
keeping
would.
Unco.
Yeah, I'm
Gotcha.
keeping
Okay,
Unco.
so you're locking Unco. Got it. Yeah, I would agree. I think I think you might be right on Crimzo. This might be the perfect time to shop him.
Yeah,
like you
100%.
could sell so high on Crimzo. I think that's a really, really smart idea. Okay,
Yep.
cool. Let's keep this segment fast. Poco and Fury. Drop him, shop him, or lock him. Yes, go for it.
It's actually kind of hard. Poco
Yeah.
is either a shop or a lock.
Mhm.
And Fury is a lock. I'm not dropping Fury. I do think he wins the battle out by the end of the season, but if he doesn't, Poco will be nasty. So Poco is, I don't know. I would shop Poco for somebody who's like who doesn't have Fury breathing down his neck, like a guaranteed starter, but I wouldn't shop him for anything less than that. I think whatever, like I just picked Poco up off of waivers and I'm hype. Like I think this is going to be an exciting situation to monitor. It might be a frequent guest on the drop 'em, shop 'em, lock 'em, cop 'em, rock 'em robot segment.
Rock'em Sock'em robot, yeah. I think Poco is a huge shop 'em like capability right now. However, man, I don't know, like that player could be on that roster for a while. But man, I'm not gonna lie to you, I have Fury in my shop 'em category.
Oh,
I think you
okay.
could sell high on Fury right now, and get a player that's more consistently in the running. That's
I'm
my opinion.
intrigued.
Yeah,
Fury for Logix. You interested?
No, I just bet on him. I don't want him on my team. I didn't think he's gonna. Okay, let's be honest. I didn't think Logix is gonna score really well. I just think he's gonna score better than Jerry. Like,
more than 0.
Let's be very clear on this. Okay.
All right, let's get to this next one.
All right,
Who else you
that's
got?
my hot. Okay, but just I want to say it again. That's my hot take. Shop Fury. Shop him. See what you can get.
That is a hot take.
Just throw him up on Craigslist. You don't have to accept the offer. Just throw it out there. See what you can find. Just put the hook in the water. All right.
I'm interested.
This next one is boring as crap compared to that last one. Fate and Carrion. Or Carrion? Karayan.
This is Karayan. This one's super easy. It's drop and it's drop.
Okay. Drop them. Double shots. Yeah, fair enough. They're both main tanks, and they're on Florida Mayhem, which is like, I would say, a middle-of-the-pack team now. So, cool. Not great for fantasy points. All right, now this one is a little more spicy. Got a bit more zest to it. Got that orange rind on top of the drink. Architect versus Violet. Drop 'em, shop 'em, lock 'em.
Double locks, baby.
Lock on both. Interesting. On Architect, you are locking.
I would shop him, right?
Okay.
But we have what? Hero Bands is week 5.
Yeah.
there's a chance that he takes Striker's DPS spot. Like
No, you're capping, bro.
Architect is
There's
fast,
no way.
dude.
No, he's not better than Striker.
He's really good. I
He's
don't know. Okay,
not
you
better
know
than
what?
Striker.
I would maybe shop him. I would wait until he had another big week and
Okay.
then maybe shop him. But for now, I'm probably locking him. I don't know if you're gonna get like great value for him
Mm-hmm.
until he's done it a couple weeks in a row.
So I'm looking to see where Shock play next, because that's what I'm curious about.
Oh, interesting.
Because, well, I think they were supposed to play in the Chinese homestand. Is that right? Because I'm looking at week 6 and I don't even see them yet, like all the way until week 6. So I think they're gonna be in those makeup weeks in week 7 and 8.
Okay.
Or week 6 and 7, sorry. And then they host in week 8 and they play
Okay.
Valiant and Gladiators. So, which are going to be great games. Holy crap. At least the Gladiators one will be. So, man, I don't know. I think since you have such a long period before they play next, I think you shop Architect, and I think you lock Violet. I think he's just so good. Maybe I
All right.
shop
Yeah.
both of them.
I'm swayed. I think I would probably shop Architect and lock Violet. There's no I can't shop. I could shop Violet for somebody else who's playing right now,
Yeah.
like another top tier flex support, but not
Mhm.
for anything less.
Do you think we're being esports boomers though? Do you think we're just so tied to the points of last year that we can't look
No.
past our Violet hopes?
No, I need to hear some scandalous rumors about Violet to think that he's not super
Yeah.
talented. He
Yeah, give me some
dominated last season.
TMZ dirt on Violet and
Yeah,
I'll
it's
doubt
been
him.
one
Okay.
season.
Fair enough.
Yeah, or it's been like one weekend.
All right. Fair enough. Okay, that's been Drop 'em, Shop 'em, or Lock 'em. We'll definitely clip this and throw it up on Twitter, maybe. Who knows? That'd be kind of fun. It was a really fun segment. Anyways, our next segment would be our mailbag episode, but unfortunately, I opened up that box and all I found were crickets this week. So make sure that you guys are sending us questions in the High Noon Podcast Discord in the Fantasy Mailbag section. We'd love to talk about stuff in there.
Somebody
Oh,
asked a
did we have something?
question. They asked, they were wondering if main supports used to get so many points. But we kind of touched on it, just
Yeah.
that like flex supports have been scoring a little less than they did in previous seasons, so main supports seem a lot higher. And just to like elaborate on it, since Kirkos asked about it, I'd say the Lucio player is allowed to play pretty aggressively while they have an Ana back there, since Ana can do so much healing, much more than Zen.
Yeah.
So I think that's allowed Lucio players to be a bit more aggressive. So they're scoring a bit more, and flex supports are scoring a bit less, which makes it seem like they're pretty valuable, but still hold on to your flex supports.
Hold on to your flex supports, but play your main supports if they're going to be hitting a map 5. And your
Yep.
other flex support isn't. Like, I think that's...
And in daily,
yeah.
main supports and daily could be huge this season.
Yeah, potential. Okay. So, okay, great. The Jiminy Cricket brought us a letter himself. So thank you, Kirkos, for talking to us on the mailbag. But that brings us to the end of the episode. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. This episode of Foul Play. We loved to do this show again. Sorry about the lack of episode last week. We will hopefully be getting on a much more consistent schedule moving forward. Thank you for joining me again, Teppo. If you want to follow us on the social media, make sure you follow us at HNP_FOWLplay on Twitter.
Yes.
Okay. I believe that's our Twitter. We definitely post. We actually have been posting so much more on there. So go check that out. We've been working very well. Okay. Teppo has been working very hard at increasing our social media presence, and I will hopefully be increasing our just like quality of video. So if you want to check us out on YouTube as well, we're on the High Noon Podcast YouTube channel. We have our own series of videos there, so check us out. And yeah, anything more that you want to plug, Teppo?
No, I'd add our Discord. Join the High Noon Podcast Network Discord
Yep.
server. You can find those links online as well. All of our links are on the Twitter too.
Yes, of course.
And then yeah, just feel free to hit us up on Twitter, Discord if you have any other questions, and we'll try to fit them in on the weekly show.
Yeah, my at's at Josh the Geek. Make sure you check out some of the really cool Bleacher Report articles that Teppo's been writing. Those are
Let's
sweet.
go.
Check out I do the Draft Buff podcast now. So if you're interested in more Overwatch League fantasy content, you can find me there, or fantasy content for League of Legends and Call of Duty, and potentially CS:GO if I don't kill myself before learning all these esports. But all right. All that to say, thank you so much for joining us again for Foul Play. We're very excited to be playing against you in our unlimited leagues and our daily leagues. Join the Foul Play 50. Join our featured league. You can win some OWL tokens. But we will see you next time on Foul Play. Thanks so much for joining us. Goodbye.
Goodbye.